The bar was dimly lit, the kind of place where shadows clung to the corners and the low hum of conversations blended with the soft, melancholic music playing overhead. I noticed her the moment she walked in, confident like she belonged, but with an air of curiosity as her eyes scanned the room. I was nursing a drink at the counter, alone as usual, when she caught my eye. She was dressed sharply, a red blouse that seemed to hug her frame perfectly, paired with a sleek black skirt. Her hair, a cascade of dark curls, framed her face, giving her an aura of casual elegance. She made her way over to me, an empty seat between us as she ordered a drink.
Do you always dress like that?
Her voice was smooth, almost teasing. Like what? I asked, turning to face her fully.
Like you're about to attend a funeral, or...
She chuckled, but her eyes held a challenge.
All black? Really?
I glanced down at my clothes, a simple black shirt and jeans. What's wrong with black? It's versatile. Besides, I'd say it suits me. She raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of her drink.
It's just so predictable. No room for expression or flair. But I suppose that's your style.
I shrugged, nonchalant. And I suppose yours is trying too hard to stand out? Her eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a playful glint in them.
At least I don't blend into the shadows.
The conversation flowed easily after that, filled with light jabs and quips about our contrasting tastes. She was into pop music, chart toppers with catchy beats. I preferred something darker, more introspective. She loved flashy colors, loud patterns. I stuck to muted tones, the kind that didn't draw too much attention. It was all trivial, really, but it felt like we were sparring, testing each other's boundaries with every exchange. Why do you care so much about what I like? I finally asked, intrigued by her persistence.
Maybe I just like a challenge,
she replied, her smile never wavering. We continued to argue about the most inconsequential things, the kind of banter that feels harmless but carries an undercurrent of something deeper. Her laugh was a little too loud, her comments a little too sharp, as if she was trying to prove something.
You know, you don't have to be so defensive.
Defensive? I'm just stating my preferences. You're the one who seems to care a lot about them. She shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips.
Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to understand why someone would willingly choose to be so unremarkable.
Unremarkable? That's one way to put it.
Is there another?
She challenged, her eyes locking with mine. Sure, I said, leaning in slightly. I'd call it simplicity, elegance, not needing to shout to be heard. She seemed to consider this.
I suppose there's some truth to that,
she admitted.
But don't you ever want to be noticed? To stand out?
I shrugged again, a non-committal gesture. Not particularly. I prefer to blend in, observe. There's a lot you can learn when people don't see you coming. Her eyes lingered on mine for a moment, something flickering behind them. Interest, curiosity, maybe even a hint of respect.
You're an interesting one, aren't you?
I like to think so, I said, offering a small smile. And you? Why the need to stand out? She hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass.
Maybe it's just how I am, or maybe...
She trailed off, her gaze dropping to the counter. Maybe what? I prompted, genuinely curious.
Maybe I just want to feel alive,
she said quietly, almost as if to herself. The admission hung between us, a moment of raw honesty that seemed to shift the atmosphere. The bar, the noise, the trivial arguments, they all faded into the background, leaving just the two of us, connected by a shared understanding of something deeper, something unspoken. We were an odd pair, to say the least, but the night went on, and soon we found ourselves sitting closer, drinks in hand, the bar's buzz fading into the background. She leaned in, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret.
Hey, this place is getting a bit too loud for my taste.
she said, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and intent.
What do you say we go somewhere quieter? Maybe your place?
I smiled, sensing the perfect opportunity to steer the night exactly where I wanted. Sure, I know a place that's just perfect. The cab ride was filled with more light-hearted banter, her laughter and my feigned amusement blending into the city's night sounds. By the time we reached my place, the air between us had shifted from playful to something more charged. She followed me inside, curiosity evident in her eyes as she took in the minimalist decor of my apartment.
Nice place,
she commented, setting her purse down on the kitchen counter.
Very you.
Thanks, I replied, grabbing 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. I like to keep things simple, she smirked, accepting the glass I handed her.
Still sticking to the whole unremarkable thing, huh?
I chuckled, taking a sip. It suits me. We moved to the living room, the conversation flowing easily as we settled onto the couch. She kicked off her shoes, tucking her feet underneath her, and I could see her relaxing, her earlier nervousness fading. So what's the real reason you approached me tonight? My tone casual but curious. She shrugged, twirling her glass.
Like I said, you seemed different. I don't know, maybe I just wanted to break my routine, do something spontaneous.
And how's that working out for you?
Surprisingly well. You're not as boring as I first thought.
I smiled, leaning back. I'll take that as a compliment. For a moment we just sat there, the conversation lulling into a comfortable silence. Then she turned to me, her expression more serious.
So, what do you do? Really?
I told you I'm in the food industry, but it's a bit more specialized than that.
Specialized how?
I took a deep breath, knowing it was time to shift the conversation. I deal in rare flavors, unique ones, the kind you can't find anywhere else. She frowned slightly, confusion clouding her eyes.
Like what? Exotic spices or something?
Something like that, but much more exclusive. The kind of flavors that people will pay a lot of money for. Her brow furrowed, and I could see the gears turning in her head.
How do you even find something like that?
I leaned in slightly, my gaze locking with hers. I have my ways. Let's just say it involves a lot of creativity. She laughed nervously, trying to shake off the unease that was starting to creep in.
That sounds a bit ominous.
It's just business, I said, my voice soft but firm. But you work in flavor development, right? She nodded, still holding on to the thread of the conversation.
Yeah, I do.
That's why I chose you, I said quietly, watching her reaction. Her eyes widened, the realization slowly dawning on her.
Chose me? What are you talking about?
I stood up, moving to stand in front of her, my expression unreadable. You're in the business of creating flavors, but you've never tasted anything like what I offer. She stood up as well, backing away slightly, her earlier confidence wavering.
This isn't funny.
No, it isn't. Her back hit the wall, and I could see the panic setting in, the realization that she was trapped.
What do you want from me?
It's simple, I said, stepping closer. I specialize in flavors that are rare, unique, the kind you can't find anywhere else. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts, her eyes darting around the room for an escape.
You're insane!
Maybe, I conceded, a small smile playing on my lips. But the people I sell to, they don't care. They just want something new, something exciting, something that no one else can offer. The wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. She swayed, trying to steady herself, her eyes growing heavy. She lunged for the door, but I was faster. I grabbed her wrist, pulling her back, her scream muffled by the thick walls of my apartment. Shh, don't fight it. It'll be over soon. Her struggles grew weaker, the fight draining out of her as the reality of the situation set in. She was caught and there was no escape.
Why?
Because, I said, my voice low and cold, the world's always hungry for something new, and tonight, you're the main course. As her cries faded into silence, I looked around the room, the remnants of our earlier conversation echoing in my mind. The argument over clothes, music, all those trivial things, they seemed so far away now, drowned out by the growing dread that had enveloped us both.
What did you do?
She mumbled, her voice thick with grogginess. I watched as she fought to stay awake, her body betraying her. Just a little something to help you relax, I said calmly. You seemed tense. Her eyelids fluttered, her legs giving out as she crumpled to the floor. She tried to push herself up, but her limbs felt like lead.
No, please.
Shh, shh, I whispered, crouching beside her. Just let it happen. It'll be easier that way. Her eyes, filled with a mix of fear and resignation, met mine one last time before they closed, her body finally succumbing to the drug. The room was silent except for the sound of her shallow breathing, and I stood up, my mind already on the task ahead. Tonight she would become something truly unique. I carried her down to the basement, her body limp and heavy in my arms. The air down here was thick with a musty metallic scent that clung to the walls. The creak of the wooden steps echoed, amplifying the growing sense of dread. The dim light cast long shadows that danced along the walls, glinting off carefully arranged tools and implements. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open, but I could see the grogginess in her gaze. The drug was still doing its job.
What? Where are we?
This is where the magic happens, I replied, my tone casual, almost friendly. She tried to move, but her body refused to cooperate.
You can't do this,
she whimpered, tears welling up in her eyes.
Please let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear.
It's not that simple. You're part of something much bigger now. Her head lolled to the side, her eyes struggling to focus on me.
Why me?
I crouched down in front of her, lifting her chin so she had to look at me. Because you're perfect. Your knowledge, your creativity, it's all part of what makes you unique. She closed her eyes, a tear escaping down her cheek.
Please,
she murmured, her voice fading as she slipped in and out of consciousness. I stood up, moving to one of the tables to prepare. The silence was heavy, broken only by her occasional whimpers and the clinking of metal. When I returned to her, she managed to open her eyes, her gaze meeting mine with a mix of fear and resignation.
What are you going to do to me?
I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You're going to help me create something truly unique, something the world has never tasted before. She shivered, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Her eyes filled with tears again, her body shaking with sobs.
Why me?
Because you understand the importance of uniqueness, of creating something that stands out. She closed her eyes again, her body sagging against the restraints.
I get it. There's no way out, is there?
No, there isn't. For a moment there was silence, her breathing the only sound in the room. Then she opened her eyes, a resigned determination in her gaze.
You're definitely not what you seem.
I nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. Neither are you. She managed a weak smile, a final act of defiance.
Do what you have to do.
The words hung in the air, a solemn acceptance of her fate. As I moved to finish what I had started, her gaze never wavered, holding mine with a strength I hadn't expected. It was in that moment I realized that, despite everything, she had retained a piece of herself, an unbroken, indomitable spirit. The basement was filled with a heavy silence, the final act of a grim play. And as her eyes closed for the last time, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something. Respect, perhaps, for the woman who had faced her end with such quiet strength. In the end, the world would know her not by her name, but by the rare, unique flavor she had become. and as I stood in the dim light of the basement, I knew that the memory of her defiance would linger, a haunting reminder of the cost of my trade.